And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man, yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man.
I'm a rocket man.
Let's see here. Charlie Saffro. We've got CS Recruiting. Why did you start CS Recruiting? Tough question right off the bat.
All right. It was an accident. I bet that's not the answer you expected. um, I started CS recruiting out of a response to opportunity I saw. Very long story short, I was doing some recruiting in the industry for a logistics technology company that sold. When they sold to this new company, I stayed on, finished some searches, but it was not going to be long term. And this was like 2010, right around like LinkedIn becoming a thing.
Yeah.
Put myself on LinkedIn and called myself a recruiter in the logistics, transportation, supply chain industry, which is what I had done for the last like 3-4 years. And I just started getting like requests from people I knew, people in my network, like, oh, can you help us find a sales manager? A lot of comments like, what do you mean you're a recruiter in the industry? Like, you know what a freight brokerage is, or you know what LTL means, or you know what a cross-dock situation is. So really just like grew my business as a side hustle for the first year, and then had an opportunity to work with a client that had some aggressive hiring needs. And put it this way, I said yes to the opportunity without really thinking through that. Like, I had 3 kids under the age of 4 at that point. It was just
Oof.
me. But they offered me this project. I said yes and went home, panicked, and then hired my first employee, and the rest is history. So I didn't like have a loan. I didn't have a business plan. It was just, I like doing this. I'm good at it, and there's a demand for it, and there's an even bigger demand for someone who knows this industry, like from that niche standpoint. So that's the
And you
history.
clearly do. Did you have a freight background before the recruiting, or how did you have the knowledge?
I mean, my husband was a freight broker out of college. So
Okay.
that was late 90s, Rolodex style freight broker.
Yeah.
That's what I was
The
exposed
OG.
to. Yeah, exactly. And then working in the industry, I was a recruiter, but I was on a floor with, people selling to shippers and people selling to carriers. So I couldn't help but like, I had to understand the job and the
Yeah.
industry, but also like overhear. I never have made a sales call selling any sort of like logistics service or technology, but I could, just from
Yeah.
observation.
Just in case you're looking for another career, now you can start freight brokering.
Exactly. You'll know
Just
I've
start
made
cold
it
calling.
when I'm a freight broker myself.
So
Yeah,
you won't have any problem finding any talent. So,
exactly. Exactly. I know where the best talent is.
and you're out of Chicago, right?
Out of Chicago. Yep. Born and raised here. And obviously
Born and raised. Look at
lots of
that. I don't know if I've
opportunity.
ever met somebody born and raised in Chicago.
Well,
Everybody goes to
suburbs.
Chicago.
Suburbs. I
Yeah,
want
the
to be
suburbs.
honest.
The
I know
suburbs.
someone will like slam me for that. Like, that is not
Yeah, you're
Chicago.
not real
I
Chicago. You're
know.
in the suburbs.
I lived in the city, like city for 15 years. Till I had my third son, and then it was just like enough is enough.
Got to go to the burbs.
Yeah, need some space.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then, so that's why you started it. And I like the origin story of like, hey, I was good at this thing and I decided to make it a side hustle and turn it into a real business. And you took the chance and hired somebody, which is a
Yeah.
really difficult thing to do. And then you're responsible for them.
Hmm.
You
That
don't
person,
realize it
um,
until you do.
yeah. I mean, I want to say luck, but obviously there were, a lot of variables. But she is still with me today, almost 14 years later, serving
That's
as
so
my
cool to hear.
COO. Yeah, and it's like very cool because just her commitment, her investment. I mean, I promised her that I would get an office if she accepted my offer 14 years ago. I was like working out of my house in my bedroom, and I was like, listen, if you come work with me, I promise like we'll have a place to go work together. And that's what really like put it into motion.
I love that story. I'm going to ask you some tough questions today because I just know you're ready for them. But I was going to just parallel that when I started rocket shipping. I worked for a company called DLS Worldwide, R.R. Donnelly,
Yeah, of course.
and
We've worked with
I
them.
was an independent contractor for them. And that's kind of like I started at Unishippers, then I landed there as an independent contractor, just sales. But I
But
ended up,
for like freight services, yes, like their
yeah, so
brokerage.
I was selling freight,
Mm-hmm.
LTL, only
Okay.
LTL, no truckload, no anything else, just
Yep.
LTL. That's all I could sell. And I did that for like 4 years, 4.5 years. And then when I decided I was going to start rocket shipping, I had talked to a couple of the other employees that at that point I had built a book
Mm-hmm.
of business and I was a top sales rep for them and I was doing really well. I was 25 and I was like, hey, I think I could be a VP. And they basically told me, they said, hey, we don't ever promote you. You're just a 1099 for forever because you're our top seller. Never leave. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, and I was 25 and I did not care about money. I was making 500K a year in commission.
Yeah.
I didn't care about that. I was like, I'll be able to make money. I want to like get recognition. That's where I was at in life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to climb the ladder. I thought that's what I needed to do. I decided to start my own and do e-commerce. And one of the things like their president had told me that e-commerce was a fad. And that was in 2019. He's
Wow.
like, e-commerce is going to go back to retail. LTL is all about manufacturing and retail. And I was like, well, e-commerce is going to be a thing and we do it well, or at least I was.
Mm-hmm.
But long story short, I talked to a couple of the people at DLS and I was like, hey, I'm going to quit. Would you consider leaving? And I can't really solicit you. And there's all these rules, but we could try. And they were
If
like,
you
yeah,
quit at the
let's do
same
it.
time, if we quit.
Yeah. If we quit at the same time, we
Yeah.
could do it. And so I
Mm-hmm.
put in my notice, I quit. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And then I quit. And they're like, you know what? Probably not so good of an idea because I don't know if it's going to work because they told me they're going to sue you and like you'll lose. And so they intimidated them, and I ended
Mm-hmm.
up having to start on my own. And now that was in November, so now it's almost Christmas, and I don't have an
This was
employee.
19.
2020.
Oh,
So
this
this
is
is like
2020. Oh, wow. You
this
really.
is 2020 election, Delta wave, COVID,
Oh, man.
and Christmas coming around the corner. I have
Uh-huh.
no employees, and I have $10 million of revenue. I got a service for LTL, and I'm like, I gotta find somebody to help me because
How did
that
I
didn't
not
work.
solicit you? Did you ever get I'm like, how did I not find you?
I wasn't on LinkedIn. I wasn't an agent. I was just kind of like a little 1099 rep
Yeah.
hiding in the industry. And I, ended up talking to his name's Brandon, but he
Mhm.
worked at Unishippers in Fargo. And when I was an intern at Unishippers, I remember him working in like the back office, like he would do the
Okay.
operations. I saw his name on an email. I found him on Facebook and I solicited him. I was like, hey, I'm starting a freight brokerage. Would you want to work for me? And I met him at like a little restaurant
Huh?
in town, a little barbecue joint. And I was like, hey, I'll offer you 75K base. And that was more than he was making.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, I'll quit. And I was like, but before you quit, it's just me and you. And I don't have an office because it's Delta wave COVID. And he
Yep.
goes, okay. And he quit over Christmas and started January 4th.
Wow.
And he's still here.
He's
He's our
still there.
operations manager. He's still
I
here. Still
love
crushing
that.
it.
And wait,
So
Unishippers, who were they bought by?
Worldwide Express Group.
Okay.
So
I
it was
was like,
Worldwide Express bought Unishippers. It's kind of weird. I think the same private equity group actually bought both of them, and then they merged them, but didn't merge them. And then when they bought Global Trans, they said now it's Worldwide Express Group.
yes. Okay.
But
That's funny. Unishippers used to be like a big target for us, like to poach,
yeah,
like to look for, candidates, but I was like, I knew they disappeared and
yeah, they're kind of like back. They do like a franchise model now, and like
okay.
Worldwide Express Group has Unishippers as a franchise, Worldwide Express as direct sales, and Global Trans as an agent network. I wouldn't work for any of them, but I'm not biased or anything. Uh,
Exactly. Well, let me ask you a question real quick. Now, I mean, now that you have your own business and you told me earlier you've got, this team of W-2 employees, what is your philosophy on the agent model, having been an agent and 1099?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the agent model is great for LTL. I think it's one of
Mhm.
the only paths to enter LTL. You can't call R&L and say, "Hey, I'm gonna have a big freight spend. I'll find customers, give me blanket rates." And
Right.
so, if you find the right agent partner, and that's what we did to start, that's probably the only way to break into LTL.
Okay.
I think if you only do agent model, then that's just a career choice, right? And so if you
Mhm.
want to be an agent owner, you can make a lot of money and you can have a great living and you can have great partners and you
Yep.
can love business.
Yeah.
But if you want to own your own technology and you want to innovate and things like that, you kind of have to figure out what drives you. And
Yeah.
so I like to build tech and, I don't code, but I like to architect and design technology. And we do a really niche service of white glove and home delivery and LTO curbside. So it's not something that, an agent model would have an edge on necessarily, but we do a
Sure.
lot of that. And so I would say if you're trying to get into LTO, it's the only way to go. I would never be a W-2 rep in LTO.
Mm-hmm.
That's if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
Unless you have a
and
book.
I think that the back office of most of the big ones do a decent job. So if you're going to be an agent and you just want to do I guess to summarize my thoughts, if I was going to be an agent owner only, and that's all I was going to do, I would have 1 or 2 employees and I would let the big company run everything else. And I would be
Yeah.
an awesome sales rep and I would make $1 million a year.
There you go. Exactly. I know
That's what I would do.
there's something about being accountable for yourself, especially as like an entrepreneur. Like you can manage
Yeah.
yourself. It's when you start layering in the
Yeah.
people so you can scale. It's a different story. But
Yep.
because the way you describe yourself as an agent is like what every company in this industry has ever wanted, and it's like really a unicorn. Like find me someone who has this book of business, knows how to sell independently, is a real hunter, doesn't have a non-compete,
Yeah.
wants to increase their suite of services. So,
Yep.
but there's not a lot of people like that, and we don't even recruit agents because they're so hard to find, and it's not the business we're in. We're in the business of you're hiring for your team and building your culture, and the
Yep.
people who are going to be with you long term.
And I think you can do both as an agent, but I think that if you're trying to build out a bigger team, the splits just don't work long term if you're going to try to do niche.
And there's
But
no
I know there's
loyalty.
large agencies that all they do is agency freight and it's
Yeah.
brokerage. They're doing $1 million GP a month in LTL, and I know of them, and it's transactional. They got 900 active shippers. They've built it
Yep.
over time. It's totally possible.
It's
I
possible.
just look at what I get up in the morning and think about churn and how do we make sure we don't lose customers and add
Yeah.
value so that I don't have to think about losing my biggest brokerage customer, which is what I do at Rocket. And I just make sure I don't lose my biggest customers.
Yeah.
The agent model can't prevent churn. So the only
No,
growth model is to always get new customers.
exactly. And there's no loyalty unless you really
Yeah,
make it.
relationships are everything until 2022 comes along and LTL rates are raised by 30% overnight because the LTL carriers can do that and they pass the overlength fees. And then everybody says, hey, man, I love you. I need to save money.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
it's okay. A little bit of an inflection point.
And we're
So,
still waiting for it to go back to normal.
yeah, what's crazy is no one talks about this. The LTL market, the rate increases continue to come every year, and they're doing them off cycles still, and they call it pricing discipline. But in the truckload market, it bottomed out and it's still low. And in LTL, they're just like, yeah, we're never dropping rates. We're just going to link arms as the top 10 carriers and just call it pricing discipline.
Sounds like a
And so,
monopoly or something.
yeah, pricing in LTL right now is more expensive than 2022. And that doesn't make any sense because the volume is,
The
I mean, if you look at
capacity's
the
there now.
earnings call, the tonnage and the revenue per shipment and revenue per shipment's fine because they've raised rates.
Yeah.
But tonnage and shipment count and all of those metrics are way down year over year over year.
Wow.
Pricing is up. So that's kind of interesting. I was going to ask you one good tough question would be, why are you still in business after 14 or 15 years? That's what came to mind because everybody I talk to in freight
Mm-hmm.
says, I'm going to build a company, I'm going to sell it in 5 years, and that's my whole life is I'm going to plan for an exit. And I know that you have built a successful company and you could have sold it maybe. So why do you still have it and why didn't you sell? And what's your what wakes you up in the morning and says, hey, I'm going to go build a company bigger, or is it
Yeah.
culture? What is it?
And no one's ever asked me that question. So I appreciate that. I have always said, again, I didn't start this business to be, my nest egg, although that's, it's become my life. It's
Yeah.
my fourth child, really. But I've always said, I will do this as long as I'm having fun. And I truly enjoy what I do. And I was thinking about this the other day in a totally different situation. Would you rather give a gift or receive a gift? And I am so much more excited to give a gift, to someone that I
Yeah.
know, I know that they're going to want this, thanks for thinking of me, but I want to see you smile and I want to see how I can change your mood with this. And I think that's what recruiting is about. When I started it, it was very gratifying for me. I was finding people jobs, finding companies people. 1 out of every 50 people will thank you and acknowledge you for being part of their career, but it's those people that really just made me want to keep going. When I started to build my team, I found a lot of employees like that, but I've also realized like the churn can also take that away. And so not
Mhm.
everyone is like, yeah, I wake up and I'm motivated because I help people find jobs every day. Um,
Yeah.
but but over the years, like I've gotten notes from wives of, people that we got a new job, and the wife reaches out to me and says, my husband doesn't even know I'm sending you this letter, but like you getting him a job changed our whole life. Like we were on the verge
Yeah.
of divorce. So many things that I'm like, that's what I go back to. And I'm having fun doing it. Now, I will be very honest, like 2020, I wasn't sure. And it turned out,
Mhm.
obviously, no one was. But 2020, 2021, 2022 were the best years of our business. 23,
Yeah.
24 have been the hardest. And
And
so,
what are you in freight?
exactly, right? It's like, yeah, if you're not moving freight, we're not hiring people to help you move that freight or
Yeah, you're downstream of it by just one notch, though. It's like a direct correlation.
it's a direct, and it really starts with, you know, like demand. So like if consumers aren't buying because of inflation, then manufacturers aren't producing, then you guys aren't distributing and no one's transporting, and then no one's hiring. For sure no one's
And if
hiring.
money and the cost of capital is so high that freight brokerages, no one talks about that either. It's the biggest expense in freight brokerage is floating money.
Exactly,
That's why
right.
all
The
the
whole-
factoring companies charge their fees that they do. If you're talking truckload, LTL
yeah,
is a little more lenient. You can pay 30 sometimes, but truckload, I mean,
it's
the cost of
service.
capital is impossible right now. If you
Hmm.
want to get a line of credit, it's over 10%.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't think you can service that on a, let's say you're doing 20 million and you need a line for a million five for a 30-day float. 10% on a million five. Okay. That's like hiring 5 employees.
And that's how I always think of it. I'm like, wait, that's a salary,
Yeah.
that's 3 salaries. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess to answer your question, have I been approached? Yes. Have I thought about it? Yes. I think because I like what I do, and I've like, over the years, this is not easy for me to say, but like I've accepted the fact that I'm good at it and I get satisfaction from my work. Like,
Some might say you're the best at it, Charlie.
well, thank you. I don't, I mean, whatever, but it takes a while to finally be like, yeah, I am good at this. But you start to realize like when your work gives you satisfaction and it's not all about work-life balance, it's just like this
Yeah.
harmony, like work is life and life is work for me. And it's a lifestyle for me. So, I don't know what else I would do, to be honest. Like I think that's part of it at this time. And I've got a lot of people counting on me, and that's kind of just part of the progression. Like, you know, we were talking about this earlier, but I added it up the other day. Like when I started the business, I was the only person. But then when I started hiring for the first 7, 8 years, I was the only person with kids. Today we have 26 CS recruiting babies that have been born since, we
Jeez.
started. And when I think of
The
that,
whole
I'm like,
family.
yeah, I mean, like we really have supported. There's a lot of people counting on us, but I also don't take credit for doing this alone. And like, I just want to be
Yeah.
if I was still a solopreneur in my bedroom, it would be a very different situation. Like I have really hired some great people along the way who've supported me
Yeah.
with the growth, and that's part of it. Like I'm invested in them and they're invested in the business, and that means something.
One of the things you said, and I have to pull that thread, is you don't know what you would do if you weren't doing this. I answer that question the same way every time.
Right?
And like, of course, I think about selling, but I never built rocket shipping to exit.
Mhm.
Like
Exactly.
I didn't leave DLS and start Rocket to be like, yeah, I'm gonna be done in 5 years when I'm 30.
And that
What would
is
I
how
do
a lot of
then?
people plan. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what everybody says. And all the private equity groups and all the VC groups that talk to me and say, hey, we could take this percentage or we could invest here, we could merge there. I'm like, well, I don't want to,
Right.
and I don't want to exit. And so then I was just talking to my brother-in-law who is in like executive recruiting and
Hmm.
like for CFO type hires, and he was
Hmm.
calling me yesterday about, hey, do you need help in this? And we were talking about
You
business, and I
said
was
to
like,
him though, like, if I need help, I'm calling CS Recruiting. So thanks.
yeah, that's
And
what
he
I
would love
said. I said, hey, family, no, we have Charlie Saffro over here.
it. Exactly.
Um, But no, he was talking to me and he's like, "Well, are you doing exit planning?" And I said, "Only when people ask me about it. Otherwise, I just like building the business." It
Yeah.
was never my idea or never my idea to even sell.
Yeah.
And then the only time I ever think about it is when other people approach me to buy the business or invest in it or talk about exit planning. And I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't my idea. And
Yeah.
I have to remind myself that. What would I do if I wasn't doing this?
Exactly. And it's hard. Like I think for a long time I thought year to year, day to day. And in the last couple of years I've owed it to my team to at least give them like a 3-year vision, a 5-year
Yeah.
vision. But it's also hard. I mean, when I say I don't know what else I would do, I've always said that, but what I'm actually doing today is dramatically different than what I did 10
Yeah.
years ago. And so it's like, well, I'll always figure something
You'd
out.
have to find a new vehicle,
You just have
and
to
then
find
there's always the
exactly.
non-compete and the earn out. And I just have seen that go wrong so many different times. It's like the only way I would ever do it is if someone wanted to buy my business for more than it was worth today, and I get to be the CEO and I get to run it.
And you're running it.
I'll take my chips off the table and I get to keep doing it. Maybe I'd
Yeah.
consider.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Or I guess if I in 2 years wake up and say, man, everything's going wrong and I don't foresee that this is going to work in the next 18 months, then maybe I have to exit, which is what happens a lot. People exit and they celebrate it. I'm like, yeah, it looked like that maybe that was your only option. Uh,
Exactly,
so,
exactly. And I mean, I think like I was just in a meeting this morning talking about how we are just seeing and hearing so much like M&A news again in this industry. And
yeah.
so, there is that component. And I hope not the case for businesses like yours or mine, that like we still have something very boutiquey and really
Hmm.
setting us apart as a small, medium business. But I think acquisitions, like I'm very aware that AI is a financial investment that I may or may not be prepared for because I don't even know what to prepare for. And
Yeah.
some of these,
No one really does,
no
though.
one really does, and
And if
I
they
do
say they do, they're probably early or late. And it doesn't really
exactly.
matter then.
So I'm just not naive to that. That like there may be a day where like you've got to partner with the big guys because they have the army that we mindfully didn't develop. Like you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like I strategically never wanted that, but you may need that backing one day. Just because I mean, you start to see if you look at like what XPO has done in the last 10 years, that wasn't that wasn't part of the plan originally for those companies, but it was part of their growth model at the time.
Yeah, Brad Jacobs is now done with. I mean, I don't think he's done with it, but he's got his new project, and I'm like, man, that was quite a 10-year run there.
Exactly.
Uh,
Well, I will tell you, full circle, that was my opportunity that I said yes to when it was just me. So I had
really?
yeah, it was 2011. And it was like looking back, like I can't even believe I went to this meeting. It was like 3 guys at a airport hotel at 6 in the morning, and it was Brad and his right and left hand, and he owned United Rentals, and they had this idea, and his right and left hand were brokerage guys, or one was, but yeah, this idea to like buy companies and build a brokerage and then build
Roll up.
from the ground up. And he's like, yeah, we probably need to hire 200 people this year. Can you do it? And I was like, absolutely. And
That
then
guy's so crazy. I want to meet that guy.
exactly, he's a super interesting guy. It's funny. I've never told him that story. I would tell him, you know, told him how grateful I am that they took a risk on our business. But
Yeah.
yeah, like I literally figured that out overnight so we could deliver. And it led to, gosh, I bet we placed 400 or 500 people at XPO in the last 15
Jeez.
years. Yeah. So it's
Okay, let's talk business then. When you're placing somebody, and then I do owe it to whoever's going to listen to this to because I have Charlie Saffro on. I tend to think that folks like you and probably you at the top know more about what's going on in the industry than everybody else because you have all the whispers and all the M&A news, and the
yeah,
reason you would know is because someone might be moving, they might be available because things are going to happen. And so I do owe it, so I'll pull that thread later.
yeah, yeah.
But what is your business? You recruit what positions? I got to get a little plug in for
Thank
CS
you.
recruiting here.
I appreciate that. We recruit for any role that has influence in supply chain, logistics, or transportation decision making. There is a perception that we only recruit brokerage, which is not true. And it makes sense because we're in Chicago and that's where we started. And a lot of these,
Yeah.
brokerage players have now moved on and they're in tech or they're on the shipper side. So we may be working with a lot of the old backhaulers, but they've also expanded. So we are working with, 3PLs, brokerages, and more of the managed solution. We work with asset providers of all modes. We work with shippers, so manufacturers, distributors, any commodity, and then tech companies, factoring companies, insurance companies. What we say is, I mean, we are very good at executive level recruiting. So keep that in
Yeah.
mind when your brother-in-law calls you next time. No, I'm just kidding. We're very good at the executive level, but what makes us different, other than our knowledge and our network, is that like a company like XPO, we would go in and help them find a branch president. So like the top dog for that location, get to know this individual, and then find their sales manager, their ops manager, their 3 senior sales reps, their 3 senior carrier reps, and like really build out that team all the way to, a $40,000 overnight dispatch role. So we do it all. But yeah, the shipper side, I would say, is probably most unknown. And that's where, lots of transportation jobs, but also roles within like distribution, manufacturing, material
Yeah.
procurement, planning. So that is what we do. And we also do some talent advisory, some consulting. If a client was scaling and needed to, benchmark compensation in the industry or understand retention or, what employees are looking for right now, we've got a lot of data. So, but at our heart, we are headhunters. That's the easiest way to say it. We take on a search, we go out and we literally hunt heads to evaluate for our clients. It's not just
Yeah.
like a job description and we're sending resumes.
So there's two sides to every one of those transactions. Do you think you work more with companies who come to you and say, find me somebody? Or do you have like a pool and you approach companies and say, I have somebody for you. I know you're going to need it. Which I know one's kind of inbound, one's outbound.
Yeah, no, we have always relied on the inbound strategy. And I think that is where like we've just intentionally, now unintentionally, then put a lot into our brand and awareness. And it's
Yeah.
like, I always give this example that like, if a plumber rang my doorbell right now and I answered, I'd be like, what are you doing here? He's like, you got any toilets overflowing? Like, no, but I'll take the card. Thank you. Or throw the card,
Yeah.
on my refrigerator. And then in 2 months, my toilet overflows. Like, thank God that plumber stopped by. I know exactly where his card is and I'm calling him. And that's how recruiting is. It's like, you don't need us unless you need us.
Yeah.
And some companies do a lot of planning and they can forecast, but a lot of times it's like, this guy just turned in his resignation, or we just made the decision to eliminate or to grow. So it's being out there so people think of us when they have that need. That's been
Yeah.
really what our strategy has been. The other strategy works too, but I'd say that's where recruiters probably get a bad rap, because a lot of recruiters will,
Feel like they're poaching then. Yeah.
yeah, or I'm calling you
Yeah.
because I saw you had a carrier role open, and I'm calling you and saying, I have a carrier person in Fargo ready to start tomorrow, when like I really don't. But I could find
Yeah. Well, so you sound like a freight broker.
right, like I could find one for you for sure. I
I
probably
got a truck in hand. It's not
yeah,
in my hand, but there is
exactly.
a
Like
truck
they're
in
here.
someone's hand.
So
The
we do
reason I asked it that way was to kind of like pull the differentiation of, well, I was talking with Kara Brown last week,
both. Hmm.
and she was talking about like 5% of buyers at any given point, or of all the buyers out there, only 5% of them at any given point are even buying freight. But if you're not in front of them when they are buying freight, you miss out. And so how do you
Exactly.
stay in front of them? How do you know when they're buying? All of that strategy. And we talked only about inbound and about intent signals. And I said, Kara, it's kind of funny because everybody else I talk to in the whole industry is talking about outbound sales. And that's like
Hmm.
how everybody in freight builds their book of business is outbound sales, including me for most of my career.
Hmm.
And then I ask you, and you're talking about inbound. And I'm like, why is it that the really successful lead coverage and CS recruiting have figured something out that all the freight brokerages who are using their services are like, yeah, we're not going to copy their business model. We
No,
just want them to
it's
find
because we're
people.
women. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I mean,
Oh man, we're gonna have to clip that, and then I'll get in trouble, but it'll be fun.
send it to Kara.
Uh,
No, I mean, I think, when I really think of like the history, I could have done it differently. Maybe there were points where I should have done it differently, but I wasn't building this business to scale. I was doing it
Hmm.
organically and authentically. And if you came to me looking for a role, I was going to build a relationship with you, whether or not I was going to make a dime off you. And that's just how, like, I drop a lot of breadcrumbs. In 20 years of recruiting, of dropping breadcrumbs. And then the day Gabe needs a new job or needs to hire and his brother-in-law, doesn't do our kind of recruiting, then you're calling me. So it, I don't know. I know I respect that it's a lucky position to be in for many years of just having,
You made the luck though.
yeah.
So, but no, I mean, really, like this is another thing I talked about last week. Kara, right? Because you
Yeah,
guys are
Karen and I go
like just
way.
you're
Trying
one
to think.
brain right now.
I don't
Same
think,
episode almost.
yeah, I don't think I've ever gotten her a job. I think she's been my client more. She's been my client, not my candidate. But yes, we've known each
Okay.
other 10 years, 15.
That's awesome. And so the reason I brought it up is that I was talking about this last week. The reason that freight brokerages in particular do not do inbound is because they're not willing. You laid breadcrumbs, right? And you
Hmm.
invested in relationships. You waited. It could
Hmm.
be 2 years before someone needs you,
Oh,
but you'll go and build so much pipeline that you don't need them until 2 years later.
exactly.
And freight brokerages do not. Every rep is on a month-to-month quota or a
Mhm.
PIP or a quarterly, and they just don't have time. They need a transaction, and they aren't waiting for 2 years because of the model. And you want to know why the model works that way? Because everybody's trying to sell in 5 years.
Exactly.
So
And
it's like
everyone's trying to just dangle, like, yeah,
incentive,
here's
incentive,
the
incentive. Like no
uh-huh.
one's building for the long term, anyways.
That's such an
So
interesting point. I've never really thought of it that way, but it's really true. And it's like, yeah, if somebody needs to ship, they're probably going to call FedEx, but not if they need to ship in volume. No one's thinking of these companies because of
mhm.
a brand exposure that way. So,
Yep.
yeah,
And there's very little differentiation in freight brokerage. Everybody seems to move the same way and they just kind of say the same things. I can
it's all
find more
about
capacity. I
culture.
have more trucks. I
Hmm.
can get you a better rate. So then branding doesn't matter. But there are a select few companies who are really good at the branding and
Yeah,
then maybe didn't have the product backing. And then there's a couple of unicorns who had the branding and the product and actually grew really successfully in this
yeah,
market. So
exactly.
and then you have the legacy players. You have Echo, you have CH, TQL. They have brand.
Hmm.
Not everybody would say their brand is a good thing. Maybe
Exactly.
TQL's brand needs some help, but they're
Exactly.
crushing it and they're the largest privately held freight brokerage in the US. So
They're
maybe they
doing
don't need help.
something right. Yeah, yeah,
They're doing something right. They make money and they're privately
exactly.
held.
Exactly.
Um,
But going back, I don't know if you were going to circle back to this idea though that we are in such a unique position that I don't think a lot of people realize when it comes to, I don't want to call it gossip because it's a
mhm.
little bit of gossip, a little bit of like
Chatter. We'll call it
chatter,
chatter.
some chatter, and like some intuition. But I told Andrew Silver this recently that we predicted Coyote was going to sell 2-3 weeks before they did. And
Really?
we were in an office and it was like, oh, I just talked to this really amazing Coyote sales rep. And Coyote just had a reputation. They had a great culture. They did not compete. People didn't
People
want
don't
to leave.
purposely leave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We'd catch one or two here and there, but it was rare. And it was like over a period of a week, 2 weeks, where it was like, oh my God, we're just getting tons of Coyote resumes. And, you talk to someone and you're just like, why are you looking to leave? And you hear the same story. Like, I'm not looking, but like something's weird here. And we kept hearing like, there's a lot of guys in suits in our office. And like, there's not
Hmm.
more. So like something's
At a
going on.
freight brokerage is pretty rare,
Exactly. And so we were like, there's
especially Coyote.
they're either going bankrupt or they're selling or something is going on if a lot of guys in suits are in the Coyote office. And so when that was announced, like, no, I didn't know the details of it, but it's funny when our team, and obviously like it's all confidential, so we're keeping
Yeah.
it to ourselves, but you start to overhear a conversation or put something together and you're like, wait, why have we talked to three people in this, in the lumber segment today, or three people from the same company? Like, you start to pick up on these little trends, and it's just instinct at that point, but we've
Yeah.
made the most of it.
So now I'll segue into current events. We've got the war in Iran. I'm kidding. Um,
Let's talk politics, actually.
yeah, let's just
Politics and
see
religion,
here.
if we could.
Ceasefire or no ceasefire? What are we going to do? But no, so current markets, one, I want to quick lend some credibility to Charlie. How many clients, how many people do you think you see in a year at your company that are looking for a job, you're placing? Like, what are your stats?
Oh my gosh. Well, in an average
More than a
year,
dozen, right? That's a bunch.
yes. Yeah, more than hopefully a dozen a week is where we're at. But no, I mean in an average year we get about 70 to 75,000 resumes. Uh
Jeez.
yeah, and of those, these are resumes that come to us, we usually place less than 1% of them.
So
So
still 750 or
no,
7,500. I'm bad at math.
no,
I'm
maybe I'm
terrible.
bad at math. Like of 2 years ago, and we could like see the data play out at this point, 75,000 resumes, and we had like 73 placements from those resumes specifically. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of work, a lot of sifting, a lot of evaluating. We are also, I mean, we're placing way more people than that because our strategy is really outbound and it's less
Hmm.
about getting the resume and, it's getting good resumes, putting them in our database so we can go back there and find our best talent when the opportunity comes up. But I mean, we're placing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, not quite thousands, but hundreds and hundreds of W-2 positions a year. So full time. And again, these
And
are
that's
for,
that,
yeah,
like multiple different companies, dozens and dozens of clients, 3PLs, shippers. So like you're placing all over the industry, and you're not just like placing 100 people at Amazon and saying it's a recruiting shop.
exactly. No, we just
Yeah,
looked at this. I think over the last 10 years, we have placed at like 1,100 different companies. So
that's amazing. That's
lots of
pretty cool.
diversity. I know lots of diversity because we also, we need to be mindful. I'm not going to recruit Coyote people and then go get Coyote new hires. Not that they exist anymore, but or maybe they do. I don't know.
In some way, shape, or
In
form
some
for
way, shape, or form.
somebody.
Like we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, so we're very mindful of, if we have a relationship, that means we're not talking to their
Yeah.
job seekers either.
Yeah, that would be, well, that's an interesting, I never even thought about that. So
It's not like
yeah, you
most,
wouldn't do that. I
yeah,
bet some people do. I bet there's people in the industry who do
the
that.
whole business out there. And it's like,
Yeah.
legally, sure, I could, but ethically, again, if I want a transactional relationship,
Short term, yeah.
yeah, but we're looking
Like,
long term.
Charlie, I just got someone placed from you, but then I heard that you took my VP. Like,
It's
what's
like, but
going
we
on
have a
here?
new VP for you, so it's perfect
Why didn't you tell me? We were just talking. So yeah.
time.
Okay, so current events. What are you hearing? Maybe you can't say much, but you could say round figures, or you could say big picture. I know from Twitter, which is a source of authority in the market,
Yes, always.
um,
Like
that
Reddit,
there's a bunch of
Reddit.
M&A activity. So Matt Silver from Cargado, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I interviewed him. I should know it's
Brigado,
Cargado.
yeah.
And then Ken Adamo from DAT, and all these
Mm-hmm.
people be tweeting that there's all kinds of M&A coming. Chad Olison is talking about it
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. All these exciting things coming in the summer of 25, which is really just consolidation, because it's not like big companies buying startups. That wouldn't really be a newsworthy thing. So
Yeah.
consolidation, is that going to be good for the industry? Is it actually going to happen, do you think?
I do think it's happening. And I think it's happening for some of the reasons we talked about earlier. It's just like technology is evolving so quickly, and there is a lot to be gained with the consolidation, both from a cost savings and, just obviously like a revenue stream or multiple revenue streams to contribute. I do think I think there's money in the industry again. I think for 2 years, there was just a lot
Yeah.
of skepticism and uncertainty, and, people were holding back. But my point of view is just, obviously we're not M&A brokers, but like talking to companies, yes, we need to hire. This is why we're hiring. And by the way, we're for sale. Or, and by the way, if you know anyone selling, we want to expand our flatbed
Yeah.
service. So I get a lot of, again, chatter, but I would say the chatter has picked up significantly, and it's usually a bolt on. We already do LTL. We just want more LTL business and talent, or it's
Yeah.
a diversification. So like we're a, mostly dry van, and we want to, hit other markets or get into warehousing or get into freight forwarding. So we're seeing it, but truth will tell.
If I had an unlimited money supply and I could buy a company, I would buy Vuma, or I would buy
Vuno,
one of
like
the other.
The risk.
Uh, no, Vuma AI. It's like
Oh,
the Jesse Buckingham.
I don't
They're
know.
like they're building AI agents for freight
Oh,
brokerages,
yeah,
and they're a Series A company. And then there's Happy Robot. That's who. If I was one of the big companies, I would just buy one of those startup, maybe not so much startup, Series A, pretty successful
yeah,
companies that has like 8 or 10 developers building AI agents for brokerages, and I'd be like, that's now only mine, and then they
exactly.
would just dominate. And it can't be
It's
CH or
wild.
TQL, and those ones, they're just too big to innovate. But it could be a $100 million or $200 million freight brokerage that if they built AI agents wouldn't hire any more people for a bit, and then their OpEx would look really nice. That would be what I would do. I can't afford to, but that's who I would buy.
Well,
But
yeah,
I
and
think
I'm
it's going to
gonna.
be big buys, mid market, and bolt on. And we have a new service offering, and maybe there's a like Redwood will probably buy a bunch of people again. They already do.
Yeah.
So
And it will be right. It will be an AI
interesting.
play or a tech play or something that's
Yep.
sexy, and that's why they're doing it.
Yep. And I think that part of the reason all that consolidation will happen is because capital's back, even though it's expensive, it is back, and then you can
Hmm.
depreciate that on an acquisition. So it's a finance strategy as much as it is a growth strategy.
Exactly.
And there's a bunch of companies who can't grow organically the way they want to in this market. So inorganic growth is the only option
And there's
because
a
they've
lot of
tried for
investors.
2 years to grow organically and it has not worked.
Right, exactly. And I think there's a lot of this has always kind of been the theme. Like there's a lot of investors who don't know this industry. They know how to manage money and how to make investments,
Hmm.
but I've seen a lot of situations where, yeah, like the investors think the market is better than it is, or just because they're reading the news or they're talking to people. So yeah, I think there's a like a different level of either optimism or skepticism on their part that isn't always how the industry sentiment is.
Yep. All right. Here's a tough question. Who are the top 5 logistics companies in the market?
I mean, size or what? What do you want?
And like, who do you think the best companies are? Maybe they're your clients. I don't want to get you in trouble by not naming somebody that you should have named, but who do you think the actual like players are out there that people would want to work at?
Okay, this is hard. I mean, obviously rocket shipping.
Well, yeah, clearly it's sponsored
Obviously.
by rocket shipping, but
Exactly. Um, like I would say I have a lot of respect for like the Arrive guys. Um, I think
they're getting pretty big now.
they're
They're in the
getting pretty
billions.
big. Like, fun fact, we recruited for them when they were called Sumo. I bet there's 10 people in the world that even know they were once called Sumo, and like then they
Just
switched to
learned that
Arrive.
today.
Yeah. So like I have a lot of respect for what they're doing, and they're doing something right, and we don't talk I mean we have worked with them and we don't talk to a lot of people from Arrive. Um Freight Vana, I don't work with them. I know the guys over there, Shannon and Josh. I think they're just doing a great job with branding, like what we talked about
Yeah,
before.
they were one of the, that was one that I was talking about with great branding.
Yeah, and I can't say that they're it's working. I have no idea. I assume it is because they continue to
They're
invest in
still
this.
alive.
Exactly,
And in
they're
this
still
market,
alive.
when you were founded in 2021, I think, and they were funded and they're still here, it means that there's
Putting
the
people
only rule in
first.
business is to stay in business. So,
Yeah, exactly. They're
and
putting
they
people
bought like,
first.
didn't they like buy a brokerage unit or
I
something?
feel like they did
It's like
recently.
Loadsmith or Load something.
Oh, yeah, maybe
Load,
Smith or
yeah.
yeah, I should
They
know.
bought the brokerage of that, or maybe
Yeah.
the other way around. I don't know. But yeah, so they're around. They got good branding.
I'm gonna stop there because now I feel like I mean, there's so many like good companies that like God, I feel like I'm gonna leave people out. Like it's my
Well, the reason I asked it is
my
that
Oscar speech.
well, I put you in a tough spot, but I did it on purpose because no one talks about the good companies in freight. We
Right.
only talk about the bad brokers, the bad carriers, the freight fraud, and
Yep.
everybody makes a buck off of that. And it's kind of, I'll just call it annoying because
Yeah.
everybody just talks about how much fraud. And I actually like, there's a couple of exceptions. I think I don't know her last name, but Danielle somebody, she works at Revanova and she's posting like every day on Twitter and LinkedIn about the MCs. And like, that is interesting to me. And she's on
Yeah.
it. If I ever needed to like find somebody or get dirt on somebody, I would just ask Danielle to go on a rabbit hole because she's
Right.
going crazy with it.
Right.
I'll probably have to have her on the podcast at this
Interesting. I
point.
like those girls from Revanova. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's like every day on Twitter, it's a new thread of like this carrier has 17 registered addresses for this one DOT, and they purchased this, and it's like a whole ring of non-domiciled CDL brokerage dispatch service cheating,
Yeah.
which
Wow.
is bad, and it's cool to shine a light on it. But most of the freight industry just talks about all the, oh, TQL stole my money, or this freight brokerage
Exactly.
is terrible.
Exactly.
It's very difficult to talk about the good companies because there's like the big dogs and then there's the startups, but there's a lot of cool companies in the middle that don't do a great job of branding but are really great companies. People just
Exactly.
don't know.
People just don't know. And like I
Yeah.
mean, there's a
Which is
company
their
called,
fault, by the way. They need to do better
they
branding.
need to do better. I mean, I mentioned this to you earlier. There's a company called ILG Logistics, small shop. Like they do great things for their employees. Everyone we place there never wants to leave. Like it's companies like that. Company called Tucker that always has like a great just loyalty with their clients. Um, to the freight point, real quick. I don't know if you know Circle Logistics, Andy Smith.
I don't know Andy, but I do know Circle, or at least a lot about him.
Yeah, like I worked with Andy, God, when he was probably a carrier rep and now he's running the business. But I was at the TMSA conference a couple weeks ago and they were talking with Cassandra Gaines about fraud. And it was really interesting because he's like, we're all worried about fraud. It's the companies that are marketing fraud prevention that are going to get ahead right now, because what our shippers and carriers care about is not that, like, we all have fraud, but like, what
Yeah.
tools are we implementing? How are we protecting them? So they were talking all about like fraud protection as a marketing strategy. And I was like, that is genius to like pivot
Yeah.
with the market. Like we're
Well,
doing it
Highway did
anyway.
that and they created the index and now everybody treats that as like the standard, but they really
Exactly.
just created it themselves like a newsletter, but it's an index.
Exactly.
And
Lots of
then
opportunity.
Genlogs is winning because of like it's I don't know Ryan Joyce. I should have him on the show if he'd be willing to. I'll have to invite him. But Genlogs is so interesting to me because it's a product that shouldn't have to exist, but is doing so well because it has to exist.
Exactly. And our industry still has a lot of opportunity for stuff like that, I think.
Yeah, that's an almost unlimited well for like being able to actually track trucks and having them change their MC numbers with the magnets on the outside of their trucks. And wow, you can actually find
That's
somebody who's holding a load hostage because you can see where they're at. That is pretty interesting. So let me pivot here. So we have freight fraud. We have all these great companies. And if you guys are listening, go back and find the names of those companies, reach out to Charlie and CS Recruiting, and then ask to go work there.
yes,
If you're working
exactly.
at one of the big ones and you're
We'll
waiting for
get you
AI
in. Don't
to,
even bother applying. We'll get you in.
the reason I bring it up, I actually really think that if CH Robinson, TQL, Worldwide Express Group, the really big dogs, RXO, if they
Mhm.
figure out AI, they are going to do some layoffs. And it really hasn't happened yet, but Microsoft just did. It was like
Mhm.
10,000 or 20,000. And Facebook's going to, and Google's talking about it. They figured out AI first. So it might not be for another 2 years before some of these big brokerages actually
Yeah,
figure out AI and they get product market fit with Vuma and Happy Robot. But when they do, they're going to do big layoffs. And so it's not just going to be like 10 people. And they won't
yeah,
publicize it unless they have to.
of course.
So they'll just at mass be like, hey, you know what? Your performance, you only grew 100% year over year. So like you're done.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, I think it's a hard market for us to like predict how that's going to go down because it's a light market right now. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's easy to say, oh, we could eliminate two carrier reps and bring in this agent and still do the same. But if we go back, to days where there's unlimited amounts of freight, I actually think that AI is just going to have your people do more in a day and work, maybe free up time to be more human. But I
Yeah.
don't know. Like if there's
There's
a
a timing factor there. If the market recovers at the same time as AI, it will just be a productivity gain.
exactly,
If the
exactly.
market never recovers like we expect it to and AI really comes in, then I actually think that small companies might make some
It's a cost
like
cutting
small
measure.
changes like, hey, we don't need as many carrier reps. We got a big account. We didn't hire for it.
Right.
But the big companies will wait, 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 wait. And then all at once, 10,000 people.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
they'll look at everything and be like, all right, everything's in place.
Yeah,
As we discussed,
exactly.
go for it.
Exactly. But it all starts with like
So
consumer demand. We got to get that back up and then it's a whole
we
ripple
do.
effect. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot more that we could go into, but let me ask you a couple of questions about your business.
Sure.
I always ask these because I think it's relevant. What's your tech stack? How do you invoice? How do you run payroll? Do you use a bookkeeping and accounting and all of that? Walk me through it at a high level.
Oh my God, you're really challenging me now. We have a person who does that at our company. Her name is Jenny. I know.
That's actually the best answer is you have somebody doing it.
Someone
You
else
don't want to
knows.
be doing all that. You
No, I
shouldn't be
mean,
running your invoicing, Charlie.
exactly. No, I'm not anymore. Thank God. No, we use QuickBooks for that. We outsource our payroll. Um, we're in a different spot because we're using recruiting technology, which is like from an integration standpoint, like QuickBooks does not understand our recruiting technology the way
No.
it may understand a TMS or whatever, you guys are
It
using.
hardly understands a TMS. It's probably the worst product, but
Okay.
everybody uses it.
Exactly. We don't use Excel, so that's good news. We're
Yeah.
well beyond that. I mean, for AI, I would say we are, scratching the surface and encouraging and training and developing our team to use tools the right way and like mostly
Read all those
ChatGPT.
resumes and look for keywords and
See, and that's something that
maybe go
just
back through all 75,000 you've ever had just for fun.
to audit them. Yeah, I mean, we have
Yeah.
nothing else to do. So, um, yeah, it's. I'd say we are uh, tech savvy enough, but there's clearly opportunity. We're just starting to like play with Zapier and make our systems talk a little more. And we're a lean team, but we've figured out a lot.
Perfect. Well, so here's a question I have for you. I'm looking to hire about 26 people in about 12 to 18 years. So do you have any like young children at CS Recruiting you can just kind of like keep in pipeline?
Yeah,
26 kids, right? So that seems to
yeah,
work out.
that's perfect. And like, I mean, they have it in their blood, so literally.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So
saying. They're going to be
yeah,
great.
they're gonna be great. I mean, just ask my kids; they know exactly what I do.
That might, I mean, I did name my company Rocket Shipping, so I will say my 6-year-old son believes, because I have told him, that I build rocket ships. Because why would I tell him I do freight? He thinks I'm Elon Musk, and I'm going to let him
Exactly.
believe
No,
that
freight is
for as
so
long as
boring.
possible.
Yeah. Oh, well, if you
And he tells his friends. So
that's
I'm a
amazing.
rocket scientist.
I think my kids probably say my mom finds people jobs, but then like if the industry comes up, then they probably are like, yeah, truck drivers or something like that, which is what we don't.
Yeah, like she stands at truck stops
Right.
and just kind of like holds a sign. It's a weird thing,
Like
but
I'm
she's
dressed
just
as a
recruiting.
clown. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll never know, but
Oh man.
hopefully they'll have their own careers. And my oldest is going to be a dentist, so I don't think he needs to know much about freight modes or recruiting.
Well, he could have like a freight dentistry where like the truckers come by and get their exams on the road. Like my dad's a chiropractor and he does
That is
DOT
true.
physicals as like a thing because
Interesting.
people have to do that.
Virtual checkups, virtual cleaning.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, there you
possible.
go. Because I mean, they're on the road all the time. It's hard to brush your teeth on the road and keep a good.
I could just show him my favorite rest stops where I hang out, and then he could just hang out
Yeah, it would be a family business, Charlie.
a
All
little
right, I have one more
station.
question for you.
Okay.
I ask everybody this, and you'll have to bear with me. So I want to ask you, what's one mistake that you made building your business? But it can't be a mistake that is like formative to why CS Recruiting is where it's at now. Like, hey, I had a mistake on recruiting these types of people, but then I figured out this and now we're more
Mhm.
successful for it. It has to be just a boneheaded mistake or something that is like, why would I do that? And so somebody listening who was like me 5 years ago and said, I'm going to start my own business doesn't have to make that mistake because they can just learn from Charlie and they can just right
Oh,
past that little speed bump.
so many mistakes. I mean, it did work itself out, but like this is who I am as a business owner. Maybe, oh my gosh, I don't know, 2018, 2019, we set an audacious goal for our team. And we were in a meeting and we're talking about like, we can do this. And I said, you know what, guys, if we do this, I will take everyone to Mexico. And everyone like laughed at me and they're like, yeah, okay. And then like a year and a half later, we did it. And that like the minute we hit that goal, everyone's like, oh yeah, how about Mexico? And like, I'm a person of my word. And so
Yeah.
there were other factors that like led us, you know, we were looking for different ways to connect, and it was right after the pandemic and we needed some face-to-face time, but we ended up going on a retreat as a team. We did it 2 years in a row, and it was one of the best things we've ever done. I think other owners would say I was crazy, but it was just my enthusiasm. It was like my way of hyping my team up and making some empty promise that like, holy shit, when your team is watching you as a leader, those promises aren't empty. Like you better come through with them.
So your mistake was actually you being a woman of your word, but it was maybe if you hadn't have promised that, you probably wouldn't have done it. And so just an expensive mistake. That's all.
Inexpensive
Yeah.
mistake, exactly. And it's also, yeah, and like you also just realize like emotional maturity. I said that, so my whole team like they grasped onto that versus like, ooh, you know, we know you said that, but the market doesn't make sense, and you know, we'll give you a break
Yeah.
for just being excited. Like they were like, where's our trip? You know,
Yeah.
so
Well, that's part of running a business that I've learned is that you do have to be careful with like what vision you set, what goals you set, and what you say, because although we would like to think that every employee that's ever worked for us is like just there for the company, like they're just
exactly,
helping build, they're all here for the brand. They're
exactly.
actually a lot of times there to feed their families, and
Yeah,
they work hard and they're like, hey, I would like that reward. Now, I do think probably that some of the people that were like the most anxious to go on that trip probably don't even work at CS Recruiting anymore, because like I think when you really figure it out, the people who are for the brand and they're there for the culture are the only ones you need.
exactly.
And in 2025 in freight, most teams, if they were smart and had good founders like Charlie, have the right number of people now. And
Yeah,
it's a lot more fun to be a founder running with the right team and the right amount of people. And I just thank you for making time, because I know you guys are busy and you're just crushing it with hundreds of clients. If you guys are looking to land a job somewhere else and it's not rocket shipping, you should be working at Rocket. We're not hiring very many positions right now, but reach out to Charlie and she'll
exactly.
place you somewhere great. And she's probably, well, I'll say it, she's the best in the game. And I don't even know her that well, but I can
Thank
tell.
you.
So
Thank you. Appreciate it. And yeah, you get first dibs. If you don't need them, then pass them to me and I'll get them a
fair
job.
enough. We'll just have like a little referral agreement.
Perfect.
Let's Talk Logistics is now unofficially sponsored by CS Recruiting, one of the top nationwide logistics recruiting agencies. Uh,
Thank
anyways,
you.
I appreciate the
I'll,
time,
I'll
Charlie.
take the plug.
And we'll go from there. Have a great afternoon and get
Thank
after
you.
it. Let's build some business.
Let's do it.